From another perspective, evil's origin is darkness, and good's origin is light. If we turn to the sun, we see light. If we turn our back away from the sun, we see a shadow. In that shadow is darkness. When we turn toward truth, when we turn toward God, we live in light. When we turn away, we're influenced by this shadow, this darkness, ignorance. And today, this dark and light is simultaneously in all of our hearts. One of my dear, most loving friends of life, His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj. I would like to share an analogy that he writes in one of his books. Actually, the reason I'm here tonight is because of him. He was born in the ghettos of Cleveland. But by his love for life and his respect for everyone, he came out of that and got a full scholarship to Princeton University. This was in the 1960s. And he was a civil rights leader here. His name was John Favors at that time. He graduated from Princeton. And gradually, his spiritual calling made him a Swami of the Bhakti tradition. We share the same guru. And how much we had in common. Our hearts. Some years ago, he was in his last stages of melanoma cancer. And I was at his bedside for the last 8 weeks, where we shared our hearts. And one day, he took me by the hand and told me, I know you have been writing this book about your travels, but you must write this book. I said, isn't this an act of arrogance to write a book about me? And if I tell the truth, brother, nobody's going to believe me. He said, this is not your story. This is the story of how God called a young boy on a journey to seek out the same meaning in life that everyone is looking for. And if your book could help anyone, if it could give hope and meaning to anyone's life, then it is an act of arrogance for you not to write it. Promise me that you will write this book. He was on his deathbed. I promised. I came out of the room and decided I'm going to talk him out of that promise. But before I could, he passed away. Surrounded by hundreds of loving followers and friends, crying and singing God's names around him. I can speak for hours about the beauty of this man's soul. But he writes that there are 2 dogs in everyone's heart. There's a good dog and there's a bad dog. There's our divine and evil demoniac nature. Spiritual life is meant to transform arrogance into humility, hate into love, greed into generosity, selfishness into selfless service, vengeance into forgiveness. But these dogs They're always fighting. And which one howls the loudest? Sometimes this bad dog and the good dog Have you ever had that experience? Maybe it's just me. Bhakti Swami explained that the dog that will win is the dog that we choose to feed. Mm-hmm. By our moment-to-moment choices we make in life. And when we keep feeding that good dog of goodness, and we refuse to feed that dog of evil within us, then by the power of God's grace, we can be free. We all have to grow old, we all have to get diseased, we all have to die. The highest freedom is freedom from that selfish, egoistic evil. Freedom to live in the light of God's grace and God's love.